Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Is the content you're producing relevant, and are you sure? So just to do the quick introductions here at the beginning, I'm Hannah Lloyd, and I'm the VP of Sales here at Oogston. And today we've got a great panel lined up of people from the tech industry who are very much giants in the thought leadership in the marketing world of that sector. So we've got Celine Nord, who's Marketing Communications Director for UK and European agencies for Tech Data. We've got Christian Wright, Chief Operating Officer at Insoc, and Janet O'Sullivan, who is Channel Marketing Manager at Otterbox. So just to set the scene for today's webinar, every B2B marketer knows that content marketing is important, and there is constant pressure to generate high volumes of output on a continuous basis. At the same time, recent studies show that poor quality content is worse than no content at all. So how do you create content that really connects and makes a positive difference consistently? So just to share some statistics here, 90% of decision makers say thought leadership is important to their process, and 57% of C-suite say the current content they receive is also useless. So today we're going to go through some questions and get some thoughts from our panelists as to how to generate content, and also what makes good content and perhaps what makes bad content. So we'll just start the conversation off with the leading question, and we'll start with you, Celine, if you don't mind. What do you believe is the biggest barrier to creating quality content at the moment?
Yeah, so hello everyone. So at first when I was thinking about this, I thought naively, well, actually, it's not that hard to create good content. You know, everyone has a story, everyone can write it, everyone can actually position things accordingly. And then I actually started to think about myself, and I thought, actually, I'm utterly rubbish at that. I'm really, really good at writing content that's probably more formal. You know, maybe from some of my academic experiences, you know, I can write the formal content, I can research it, and I can position it like that. But I am absolutely appalling at crafting that story, and the humor, I just can't do it. I really can't. So actually, I sort of gave myself a bit of a virtual slap around the head and thought it's not easy at all, and that's why there are so many challenges. You know, I've hired recently a couple of content managers at Tech Data solely because they are talents in that area, and they do have that experience and can do it. I think what sometimes makes it harder is, you know, having that time. So the time to really understand your audience, understand what you're trying to get across to them, understand what stage they're at in the buying cycle. You know, you don't need a hard sell at the very beginning where you're sort of wondering what's going on. You probably need a bit more of the supporting type messaging then. So for me, I think the hardest thing is the time and getting the time to understand your audience. And unfortunately, both of those things are vital towards it really landing well and actually, you know, driving that intention that you're trying to drive.
Brilliant. And the same question to you, Janet, as well.
Yeah, Hannah, hi. Thanks very much for having me along here. I think there's a couple of things in the question that you've asked me, and I think that one of them is kind of to put your finger on is quality. And to the earlier slide there, when you talked about, you know, C-suite saying that, you know, with something like 90% of the content they get is useless. And I think part of the problem here is that people churn out content and they just have this vision that it's one size fits all, and that's absolutely not the case. So I think that the mistake maybe that people make, or the barrier that they put up in front of them, is not actually thinking about who is this for, who's going to be reading it. And I think that if people had a kind of a clearer understanding of, you know, of where this was going to land, then I think they'd put more thought into it. And I think that's probably the biggest barrier there, is that just this kind of one size fits all and just, you know, churn it out there. And I think that's where I would start in fixing it. So, Christian.
Yeah, absolutely. Following on from that, Janet and Celine, completely agree. I think one of the other key issues that I certainly have in my neck of the woods is accessing expert opinion, whether that be within the organisation I'm in or outside of it. Everyone's quite busy doing their day jobs, but actually a lot of people hold a wealth of knowledge within their own organisation that other people, particularly in a content marketing role, might not know exist, and also might have real difficulty accessing. So I find that's one of the key elements. So I often find myself in a bit of a silo dreaming up what am I going to write about next, when actually I'm probably surrounded by people that could have much better, more insightful input than I can think up on my own, sitting around me, or at the moment sitting behind the screens at home. But yeah, I think so, that finding that, or tapping into that authentic content wherever it lies within, even right next to you, I think is one of the key challenges that I certainly face day to day.
And I think I'd agree with what Janet said there, sorry, just about the amount of content that's out there. I think you're right, there's so much content out there, and some of it is probably not, not the best content. And actually, I think sometimes it seems hard to start something from scratch, but actually, as you've touched upon there as well, Christian, there's a lot of people out there who've created content. There's a lot that we could be building on rather than starting from scratch and starting anew. Use some of the content that's out there and actually build upon that to craft the next stage of that. So it's not all just wasted content sitting out there in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Just to add on to that, saying as well, I think one of the challenges I've often found is that the sales team are at the coalface. They're talking to the customers. They're finding out the pain points, and as we know, that's always a learning process that evolves over time. But then that information is kind of siloed with them, and it never really makes its way back to me unless I sort of question people. And they're all kind of, what's questioning salespeople like? They're kind of busy hopefully making sales, so they're not ones for contributing to the marketing content funnel, but they actually hold a lot of like really valuable insight that is just really difficult to access. So and whether that be the other option, I mean, we have a service delivery model here. You have engineers on the front line, or that are speaking to customers, and they're probably finding out a lot of information that's relevant that I can't access. I don't have access to that. So there's all like a lot of missed opportunities there, I think, to come up with original content that's just sitting there in the way under your nose, but it's really difficult to get at. So that's the key challenge that I've always keep coming back round to.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. And I think that also when we're talking about this, obviously we want content to increase in demand and drive sales, and a lot of that is we hear a lot about trusted advisors when it comes to content marketing, but everyone pictures themselves as a trusted advisor. So how do you make yourself a trusted advisor through your content in the sea of trusted advisors? Janet, did you want to start with that one?
Yeah. It is, and maybe, and it is obviously sort of a term that's thrown around loosely in our industry, but it is so important, because this is your opportunity to set yourself up as an expert. And the trusted advisor, as I say, it's a chance for you to demonstrate to your customers and prospective customers how much you know about this subject. So I think you need to show that knowledge, and I mean that knowledge again, sort of the trusted advisors. Who are you advising? And the content should be, so like we often make the mistake of we deliver technical content to commercial people, or we deliver commercial content to technical people, and then you're not showing expertise to anybody. So again, it's around sort of creating the content for the right audience, and I think that's, and like I see, like one of the mistakes that I think a lot of people make is they forward on, or they sort of post on, or they broadcast stories that they picked up off the web, and they just kind of reissue them or whatever, without sort of taking the opportunity to comment them on in a meaningful way. So like you were saying to your customers, okay, here is this story, but here's how you could have made it better, or you could have made, or what they should have done. So I think that again, it's back to sort of people saying, okay, how do I want to be perceived by this piece of content, and what will my customers take away from it? And I think that, to ask your question, how do you kind of come across as being a trusted advisor? One of the things that I would always tell people is, well, talk to your existing customers and ask them for their opinion on the content that you're delivering. I mean, they would be a good benchmark. They will, how does this content land with them? Does it reflect what their pain points are? And that's always something that I would think is a good barometer for your content.
Brilliant. And Celine, do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I've got to be honest, I don't really care too much about what companies are telling me themselves. What I care about, and what really makes me trust them, is when their customers are telling me things about them, or other people are telling me what they think. So, you know, customer testimonials or customer opinion pieces. You know, even if you get down to very, very basic level on Amazon, if I'm going to buy something that I'm solely buying because it, you know, arrives the next day or it's cheap or whatever, I've decided on a whim I need it, or the first place I'll go is I'll read the customer reviews on that. So I think it's really important to generate that trust in your audience, is to actually let other people talk on your behalf. Let other people talk about their experiences with you, why they found you good or why they haven't, and own that as well. You know, I really don't think it's an issue if you get negative feedback from your customers. It's how you address that and how you then resurface out content wise to say, you know what, we made a mistake here and here's what we've done about it. So I always tend to trust those organizations that do that, that let their customers speak on their behalf. Tech Data, I mean, we talk about being trusted advisors, and we've got kind of an ethos of it around partnering with our customers. So again, it's less around sales and it's more around, well, what do you guys need from us and how can we work together to build that up? And I think that's important as well. You know, it's not about being an expert, it's about being an advisor, working together in that collaborative way to find those solutions. So yeah, for me, if a company's telling me they're wonderful, I really genuinely don't give a damn. I don't listen to it. But if I hear all the customers or people like me, or people who are in the same buying stage as I am, or people who are buying those products or solutions in the same way I want to, if I read their stories and if I see their content and opinions, I'd say that's 10 times out of 10 probably what would switch me over the line to take that action and have those feelings about that organization or company.
Mm-hmm.
Celine, if I can ask a question, and to your point, then do you think the trusted advisor is almost a dead concept because everyone's a trusted advisor? Radical statement there. But I mean, in my neck of the woods, my industry as well, it's you know, everyone's buying to give out trusted information. So ultimately, people are, well, if I have to trust everyone, it almost becomes meaningless, irrelevant. So,
but that's where it's even more important. Sorry. You're right. If everyone's saying the same thing, if everyone's saying, trust me, I'm wonderful, you can't believe it. You know, that's what our jobs are, to say that about the organizations that we work for. But actually what you would then be doing is looking at, you know, if you were buying, I don't know, a new Hoover, and you maybe want to use it on your car, for example, then the people you're going to trust are other people that have bought that Hoover, that are using it on their car, that are perhaps similar types of audience, similar types of personalities to you, or are using it for the same thing, or, you know, have kids that they pick up from school and are making the mess in the car, whatever it is. I think it's that personal touch and actually that where it resonates with you, where somebody's saying something that meets the same or fits the same sort of lifestyle or situation that you're in. That's what I trust. So a company might say, yes, my Hoover's brilliant for cleaning out the car when you've got kids. And I'd think, well, you know, that might pique my interest. But it's then hearing other people talking about it or writing their stories or saying, you know, maybe there's a piece saying, oh, Claire used this in her car and actually it, you know, she sold it for 5 times more than it was worth, or whatever it might be. And then you have Claire, I mean, that was a bit over the top, but then you have Claire maybe saying, yeah, that's true, I did use it from that. My kid smears chocolate all over the windows, or whatever it might be. Those are the things that I think really build up the trust. So let your customers talk for you. Let your customers help influence the content you're creating. You know, create the content in partnership with your customers as advisors, again, to be really more, you know, to be really authentic out to the marketplace. Work with them to produce that and to show that and share that. You know, don't just sit there saying I'm brilliant. Create the content with your customers that's showing why that is and in what circumstances. And I always think about, you know, Honda did a campaign quite a while ago, and I think it was actually around their engines, and it, you know, they had a slogan around hate something, change something, make something better. And again, that was really good. They listened to their customers saying what they hated about Honda and what they didn't like about cars and didn't like about driving. So they listened to that and they thought, all right, what are we going to do to change it? And I think they had a, you know, I think they have a whole innovation studio or however they describe it that works on that. But that's okay. You can say this is crap. All right, fine. Let's listen to you. Let's understand it, and then let's make something better. And I think that's almost what you can think of with content. You know, really listen to what people are saying about content. Listen to people that are telling you what they like and what they want and what they need and what they're missing, and then make something better. So, you know, as I said earlier, and as we touched upon, there's lots of content out there already. Look at it, write your story. You know, take that, repurpose it. I think Janet mentioned about, you know, don't just push out the same content. Put your wrapping around it. Put your opinion on it. All of that really helps. So I think for me, trusted advisor isn't dead and it isn't redundant, but I think the trusted advisors become more your customers than you yourself, and that's probably more valuable than you being the trusted advisor yourself.
Yeah. The other thing just that I would say there, Hannah, it talks to what we were talking about earlier about, people being sort of daunted by content. Content doesn't always have to be sort of, a massive white paper, or it doesn't have to be, something that takes an awful lot of time. Content can be kind of be small. It can be a 2-line testimonial from a partner. But the other thing that I think it's nice, I mean, especially in a B2B context is to push out updates about the company. So, I mean, if you've hired more staff, say that, because those are the kind of things as well that people say, oh, they're hiring, they must be doing very well. And those kind of things help build trust about the company. I mean, if you've been nominated for some kind of an award, that's something that you can talk about. If the MD has is recently spoken at the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, all of those things establish you as a company that's grounded in the community. You're hiring people, you're growing, and it all gives it layers that impression that you are a serious company, that you are sort of you are to be trusted. So as I say, it's everything about you. And it's something that you can build on, and everything doesn't have to be a huge piece of work, a huge body of work. It doesn't have to cost you a huge amount of money. And a lot of people, they have limited budgets. But one of the things that I think that would really help with content creation is to build, a content plan. And I think that's one of the mistakes that people make, is they don't do anything for a long time. Then there's a bit of panic and they scramble and they push out, a load of things in very short succession. Then they get bored with it, or they run out of things, and then there's a big gap. So I think it's important to maybe sit down, and at the start of the month say, okay, well, what are we going to do? What's the gap between pieces of content that we're going to push out, and balance it between, okay, this is, a nice serious report that we've done, so we want to push this out, and then we're going to balance that with maybe something small about a charity event that we sponsored or something, and and think about how it all layers together, how it builds up an impression of you as a company, and just don't be afraid to repurpose it, because like if you have spent a lot of money commissioning a report, or if you have sort of as Christian said, you sat down the sales team, you're not letting them out of the room until they've told you all you need to know. You've generated a nice piece of content. Well, don't just use it once and forget about it, because you can use it again in different formats, and you can slice and dice it. You can take sections out of it, because I think you've invested in it. So make it work. Make every piece of content work for you. So yeah, I think there's lots of ways to show that to build trust, and and again, you're assuming that your prospective customer, it's probably going to be a while before they buy. And if you say, well, okay, I'd like to touch them at different points of the year and at different points of their journey, from when they start and they're sort of feeling the pain to, they're sort of maybe then they're starting to look at different options. So you have to kind of say, okay, I need to touch base with them at different points of their buyer's journey as well. And in terms of content, maybe there's a great piece of content that CompTIA produced around the buyer's journey, the technology buyer's journey, and I think that if anybody on the line hasn't seen it, it's well worth doing. And even when you're planning your content, to say, okay, well, do I have a little piece of content or some content that can work at each stage of that journey? So that helps as well, because effectively you're going on that journey with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I heard the noise.
I was just thinking whether really a lot of this is looking like asking questions. If you can't, like going back to your point, Celine, is it less about? It is very much, I think, a case nowadays that people are not going to sit down and read great big white papers and huge like War and Peace tomes, because who's got the time for that, frankly? So. And even if you did, is that going to help in your buying decision or journey? I'm not sure it would. So I guess I was actually wondering if you found different types of content, because I've been having a discussion this end about video content. I've got somebody I work with who's very, very strong on video content and believes that that's like the sole way to go, and then others are like, I've had less success with that. And I wondered whether because when we talk about content, there's a tendency to think about written and pictorial, but I wondered if either of you had experience with those with video, and whether you found that to be the way to go forward, or not so much.
Yeah, so if you were asking me about a year or so ago, I personally wouldn't have necessarily, because I probably don't have very much time, I would have preferred to read something rather than actually necessarily look at a video. And actually, the industry is completely opposite. So, the consumption of video assets is huge now, and it's really ramped up. So at Tech Data, we definitely are concentrating more on creating that video. And again, a bit how Janet talked about, content doesn't have to be white papers. Video doesn't have to be a full-on webinar or a full-on video session. It can be short, sharp clips. As Janet talked about with employees and sharing it on social media, it could be little snippets of things that you're getting out there, but it's perhaps, and it's certainly seen as a lot more interesting way to consume that content. So I'm definitely seeing that rising. Well, I wouldn't even say rising. I think it's risen in popularity. And that's something that we see, and then the industry seeing as well, is very, very much, it's easier for people to consume it in video sense. The other thing that I've seen rising a lot, and I know a lot of companies are doing and have had great success with, is the podcasts. I think the way they're being used has probably changed. So a lot of people were potentially pre-pandemic listening to them driving in and out of work and in and out of the office or on the train or whatever that might be. Now that's obviously changed, but actually the desire to have podcasts and the amount of people who are listening to them and using them hasn't changed, and it has risen. So again, that's another medium that we haven't done a huge amount with at Tech Data yet, but it is something that we've been looking at alongside the video part of it. So yeah, I would definitely say it's still content, but it's changing, and again, it's meeting the needs of the audience and what they want to see. And it isn't always written, it isn't always long white papers. It's short, sharp, easily consumed media and content that they want to consume really and take on.
Yeah, I have to say I like video content. As a consumer, there's this expression snackable content, and I think a lot of video is that. I think it's good. I think I think in certain circumstances it'll do very well. In Otterbox we're very much consumer products, so videos are nice and we use them a lot on social media. I think a lot depends on your product and the type of product. If your product is very complex and maybe requires a lot more explanation, maybe videos can help with that as well. But again, I think it's good to have a mix. I think that's it's good to sort of not be all dependent on all video or all sort of white papers. I think a mix is always good. And the great thing, I mean, like, it's one of the great things about digital advertising and digital marketing is that there's almost almost instant feedback on content and on any kind of campaign you're running. So I mean, like, we run campaigns where we have 2 ads. One will be animated, one will be static, and you can see very, very quickly which one people are responding to. So I think that's the beauty of the time we're living in, that you can sort of modify and adapt. So I think plus, I mean, there's so many tools now for content creation around. If you want to create little videos, and that's something that there was a time when companies had to spend a lot of money to do that. I think people can kind of dip their toe in the water and do it sort of a lot cheaper, and you can get quite a good professional type of product as well for it. So yeah, I think definitely worth looking at video.
Yeah. And other mediums as well. I think you're right, Janet. A lot of it's around convenience. So I think you mentioned about AI there, Christian. So AI is another one. I think the augmented reality part, and that's soaring. There's a lot more coming out from those kind of things. So I think when you're creating content, it's probably really important. It is really important to keep an ear to the ground around what people want, what they need. At the moment, we're doing virtual webinars. In the olden days, that might have been a physical meetup or a physical event. Now, clearly the pandemic's caused that and meant that more people are consuming content virtually. But actually, it'd be interesting to see when that starts to die off. What is the need? How do people change? Is this actually going to continue because it's so convenient? Because people don't need to leave their desks or their homes and can dial in and get served content and consume content from where they are. So I think that'll be very interesting to see. Does the pendulum swing all the way back to physical events? Is it the hybrid, which I suspect it probably will be? Or is it that we're actually going to carry on only virtually because people don't want to just turn up in person anymore to get their content and get it served to them? So I find that's probably one of the most fascinating parts around content is, you know, it relies so much on what's happening in the industry, what your audience wants, the stage of the buyer journey, you know, all of those kind of things. It's a very varied topic, really. And as Janet said, with regards to the content plan and the content matrix that you do need to be constantly moving, evolving, thinking of those things when you're creating content and putting it out there.
Perfect. I think that leads really nicely onto the next section of what is good content. So I think a really nice talking point, and we'll start off with the nice one, is can you give some examples of work you are most proud of that either you've done or that you've seen that's really worked on you from a content marketing perspective? Janet, we'll start with you on that one.
Okay, I've kind of got two examples, and they're at different sort of, you know, ends of the spectrum. That one, a company I worked with, we did a case study with the Aviva Stadium in Ireland, which is the big rugby stadium. And this is a good and a bad example in that I mean, I was sort of so proud of that case study. It was fantastic, and we all loved it. But the thing is it good content? It was great for our Irish audiences, but, you know, when we sent it out in the UK, nobody was too interested in it. So I think it's one of those things of sort of saying, you know, yeah, right content for the right audience. So that was one that I was really proud of. But then in another company, we did a case study with sort of a small, it was a self-employed person who had been a victim of a ransomware attack. And like, in terms of, like, we switch on the news and we hear about ransom attacks that lead, you know, the people are, you know, robbed of millions and companies lose millions of it. And this was somebody who'd lost, you know, she was a small self-employed graphics designer, and I think that she had been I think they had scammed her for something like, I don't know, was it 20,000, which in the scheme of things, it doesn't seem like a huge amount, but this was actually very, very significant to her. And I think that this piece of content was probably more valuable in that it spoke more to the audience we were dealing with. And I think sometimes, especially in the cybersecurity arena, we talk about the massive cases, you know, the big sort of hacks that bring down government, so whatever. And very often it's the small businesses that we're targeting, and they're saying, well, I'm not really the victim here. So I think, you know, again, it was sort of thinking, you know, who's our customer, what will resonate with them, you know, what's really going to make an impact. So I think in that instance, that was probably, you know, a better piece of content. But yeah.
Brilliant. I think that's a really great point as well. It's about making it real, that not everyone wants to even hear about all of the lovely stuff. They also want to hear about the real nuts and bolts of things. So I think that's a really great point. And Celine, I'll ask the same question to you about work that you're most proud of.
Yeah, so there was one when I worked at Microsoft. Obviously, Microsoft sells the Windows products and laptops, etc. And some people probably see that, you know, Apple may well be competitors, and, you know, we would do anything we could not to promote them. And actually, I worked in the Office 365 area at the time, and we do create, or Microsoft used to create Apple Suite, or do, sorry, still Apple Suites for the Apple Mac. Now, actually, we knew the audience were buying Apple Macs. They were designers, they were younger students. That's what they wanted, that's what they needed. And what we were trying to do was get them to use our productivity suite on those Macs. So again, it was really understanding the audience and understanding that that's what they wanted, that's what they were going to buy. But when they were buying it, we wanted them to attach Office to that to get the best functionality, the best productivity suite. So we created a campaign that was around you want the Apple Mac, you need the Apple Mac, the Office for Apple Mac software. Now, it had to be done a little bit, not secretly, but, you know, it was very, very different for us at that time, and it probably, you know, it could have gone very wrong, and actually it didn't. It went really well. We did it in out of home, outside of Apple Mac stores. And the reason I like that isn't about any of those things. It was more that we listened to what the audience wanted. We knew what they needed. We knew what they were going to do, but we knew that what they were using would be even better if it had our product attached onto it. And I really like that, because it was all around them and around the actual audience. And then a more recent one at Tech Data, we have a PACE campaign which targets sort of more the smaller businesses. And we had to create an umbrella brand for this campaign because it was, you know, smaller businesses. We wanted it to be less corporate and probably resonate more with a smaller business type audience. So, you know, we used different colours from our palette, and we made it seem a lot more consumerish, if you like, than B2B. But at the same time, it was aligned to the buyer's journey. So, you know, there'd be the onboarding stage, you'd go into the usage, you'd go into loyalty, and you'd go into, you know, sort of the regular account usage. But when they were coming in at those different stages, although they were coming into that campaign, they were going off to other areas of content that would have had different branding. So when you're onboarded as a customer, you would come into this wonderful, more consumerish type campaign. But the first place you would then go to get your content and to start learning about tech data and the services was on our corporate website. So we had to almost create an umbrella brand and then mini brands that went alongside each stage of that buyer's journey to make it a really holistic and complementary journey, depending on where they were going off on, so that they weren't getting one piece of content and then a completely different branded content when they landed on our sites. And it was quite tricky to do. And actually, it's our agency who created that. But it was a brilliant piece to be involved in, because you're thinking of your all-up brand that Tech Data wanted to get out, but then also what the audience needed at each time, where they were then going, so the second stages, not just from that campaign, what they would be doing in our wider ecosystem, and trying to make sure it was as seamless and you know, smooth as possible for them on that journey. So that was another one that I thought was really, really good. But yeah, those were kind of more personal ones. So I don't know, Christian, if you wanted to talk about that first before we go on to other things we've seen in the industry.
Yeah, I started, to be honest, I'm yet to create something I'm like cock a hoop of excitement with, but of my own making. But I think one of the problems I've got with cybersecurity is a difficult concept, and many faceted concept to explain. And then because we're marketing to managed service providers, so channel model, we are we're talking to quite a niche audience in many ways. So and these guys are bombarded all the time with the saying, going back to trusted advisor, they've got trusted advisors coming out of their ears type of thing. So the bits I found that works the best, so we've done some explainer videos. It actually took a while to hone down, but that really did sort of put into 90 seconds the nub of what we do. So I guess I would give that accolade. But yeah, I think what I'm looking and concentrating on now is sort of looking, rather than looking at what the competitors are doing, which I was kind of obsessing over slightly, I'm more looking at what we're doing internally that's different, and going back to the point about reaching out to the customer side to sort of gain insights into what they are looking for, because the cybersecurity landscape that I'm in is a bit like, it's like quicksand. It's sort of ever changing every week almost, and it's not really settled. So in one respect, it's quite a good opportunity because there's nothing hard and fast about it. But on the other hand, it's quite tricky to sort of nail it down. But yeah, I think there's lots of opportunity for me to produce quite unique stuff, again, working with the insights I've gleaned, talking to our technical team, sales team, and completely ignoring actually what the competitors are doing. So I'm trying to think of ways I can sell cybersecurity without mentioning cybersecurity too much, because that's one of the other key problems we have. Is that, you know, I think we spoke to a prospect the other day who'd spoken to 16 vendors, so we were one of 16 that they're comparing. So when you think about the amount of information they're getting, that's a lot to sift through. So we've really got to come up with something quite unique, non-acronym scattered, that kind of grabs people's attention and answers their pain points. So I guess I'm still working on that, but work in progress, but watch this space.
We'll come back to you, Celine, actually, because you just mentioned probably the next question that I think will be quite interesting is, can you give some examples of work that you wish you had created or that really did work well for you?
Yeah, so when I was thinking about this, a lot of the ones that I kept thinking of were really fantastic books that I'd read. And in some ways, I suppose it doesn't seem the same as sort of marketing content, but I kind of think it's very similar. And, you know, I remember being young and reading the Joanne Harris books, where she did one around chocolat and 5 Quarters of an Orange, A Year in Provence. The reason I remember them so much is the content was just so descriptive, and so it made me feel like I was there. I was eating baguettes in France when I was reading that book, you know, and the butter was melting. I could almost taste it. I was almost you know, eating the chocolate when I was reading that book. And those are really good examples for me of really strong, powerful storytelling and really strong content that comes from that. And another piece, which again, you know, as Janet said, we're not always talking about white papers and huge brochures, but a piece that I found really powerful was when Joe Biden wrote an open letter to the Stanford rape victim. And in that case, the woman was sexually assaulted, and two young men rode past on bicycles and managed to stop it and rescue her, etc. And he wrote this letter, and he talked about how, you know, he wrote it to her and it came across as very authentic, how she had a spine of steel. He said, you know, thanks to her, we now know that heroes ride bicycles. I mean, it was so powerful, such a powerful piece of content. Now, I know he has advisors, he has people that can write all these things, but that's something that all these years later sticks with me as a piece that really affected me. I had, you know, I had powerful feelings from it. I had a really visceral reaction to it all, and it's something that I remember all these years later. So I think for me, it's where they've got really strong, powerful stories, and as Christian said, where it seems very authentic, very, very real, and very non-salesy, I suppose, very, very much, you know, more around actually being true to what you believe. So yeah, I think for me, those were really good ones. And again, sort of on that theme, KFC did one where they ran out of chicken. And they wrote in, I think it was in the US possibly, and they wrote an open letter and they did a campaign around, you know, we're so sorry, you came to a chicken restaurant, there was no chicken, we made a massive mistake. And I think they changed their KFC to something like FCK. They changed the logo so it said that instead in the advertising campaign. But I love that because again, it was really authentic, and it was going back to what I said earlier, you know, you hate something, you change it and you make it better. So they made a mistake, they owned it, they were open about it, and then they made sure it didn't happen again. Again, I know they're a massive organization and all of those kind of things, but on the surface of it, I thought that was really good and really powerful. So those are kind of some of the pieces that stick with me. And I think it's around that story and bringing me on that story and that journey with them.
Brilliant.
So Janet, I don't know if yours might be slightly different types of content, because mine I know are more books, but what are ones that have really sort of resonated well with you?
Well, I suppose, you know, I'm calling my Irish roots here. I think Guinness always do nice TV advertisements, but then obviously you're talking about people who have budgets of millions. But I think, Celine, that you kind of put your finger on it there, you know, in the context of the Joe Biden thing, because I think that's the lesson you can take away. It's that if it comes from the heart, then it will resonate with people. And I think sometimes even companies, we might just get a little bit bogged down about trying to look slick and professional and all of that, which is obviously hugely important. But, you know, at the end of the day, people buy from people. And, you know, very often what will set you apart from your competitors is, yeah, I like this guy, I trust this guy. And if you can convey that, whether it is sort of, to say, standing up saying, yeah, we got that wrong, we made a mistake there, or else just kind of putting your own sort of personal spin on something. So the ones that, I mean, the other pieces of content that I liked, there's a company in the industry, IT Glue, they did a video which was like sort of a 30-second video explaining what they were. I thought it was really, really good. But again, I have to say that I liked that. I think to other people who are in the industry, that might have felt a little bit patronizing and that. So again, you know your audience, feel your audience and feel the mood. But yeah, those were the examples that kind of stood out for me. So yeah, Christian, what floated your boat?
Well, I can't. There are one of our competitors, actually, a company called Scout. They do produce a lot of content for the audience that we're sort of targeting as well. That's very engaging and very interesting. So somewhat annoyingly, I kind of peruse what they're doing, and my marketing budget is somewhat smaller than theirs, I suspect. But I think the key thing they tend to do, again, echoing what you both said, it's around the storytelling, and the testimonials and client sort of examples they use tend to be quite personal stories. They're told in a personal, engaging way that is designed to prick the ears of the other MSPs that are listening into that. Whereas I find often, when I'm getting old or whatever, but with a lot of case studies and things, I kind of find myself now, you can tell it's been written by somebody to showcase, you know, the company in the best light. It's not really that person telling their own version of the event. So I think, you know, going back again, using the word authentic, it's really difficult to do, but find the story and authentically tell it, almost like ghostwrite it, I guess, when it comes to a testimonial. Those type that Scout are quite good at that. I'll hope there's no one on here from Scout, but if they are, you're doing a great job. But it's very. I look at that and I think, yeah, I need to try and do something similar, but with our own, using our own customer base, because there are a lot of. I'm sure we've all got this. We're a small company, and growing, and we've only been going a couple of years, but we have a lot of colourful characters as customers. So I'm sure we all have that. So we could tap into some of those and de-corporify it, if that's a word, and allow them to sort of their voices to come through. And I think I find it difficult to do that because I've got a tendency to want to edit it and refine it and put it into our voice. But actually, to your point at the start, I think actually that's counterproductive, and it's really what other potential customers are looking for, is hearing that direct from the customer. And also, if I find as well, if somebody's connecting to someone else, they're not kind of sales perspective, that's kind of a trusted relationship that gets built up. And obviously, if you feel you're being sold to, that's a big turn off. But if you feel it's more of a conversation and someone's listening to you and asking relevant questions in a conversation, I think the content I'm trying to produce at the moment would emulate that. So it's more of a trying to take that personal relationship, and the fact we're having to do everything remotely at the moment makes that even more difficult. But that trying to take the essence of that and put it into a digital format. And often the other thing I'll say is this bit of a sense of humour with things, because everything can be quite dry, and especially in the industry it's very technical and driven. So finding little moments of humour in there that can, that resonates. I think everyone responds to that as part of the sort of storytelling aspect. So and then often those little funny stories can be found internally within your own, within your own company as well, and as well as with your customers. And as you say, opening up, Celine, to if you've made a mistake, and turning that into a positive. They're all stories at the end of the day that make you seem human and give your company and your voice a character. And I think that's the thing that's lacking in a lot of content that we see. It's just going through a sort of motions, and people are so inundated nowadays that you really have to, you've probably got a couple of seconds to capture their attention with something before they're on to something else more interesting.
But the other thing, Christian, and it plays on what you said earlier, is that I know that in the previous company I worked for, which was a big global cybersecurity company, the most successful piece of content that we did every year was kind of the annual report on the state of cybersecurity, and that was based just on information that we had within our own company. And like it was a massive effort to do that report, and as you say, you're pulling on the internal experts, but it's the report that only we could write. It was only, it was unique to our company, but yeah, and it was the most successful piece in terms of the amounts of downloads that we would get, the amounts of press coverage that it would get. So it was very valuable, but as I say, it was pulling on the resources that we had internally. And similar to that, I remember talking with one of the well-known sort of PSA companies, and their most significant piece of research, which was their annual MSP report, that again was the most successful piece of content that they used to publish every year. And in terms of lead generation and downloads, and that was the one that used to bring them in the most business. So again, it's using sort of the information, the resources that you have, whether it's your company, whether it's your customers, that kind of content actually can be the most impactful for your business.
And I've got a question on that. Obviously, Janet, you've spoken about pooling the resource that you have internally to be able to drive that content. And Christian, I know that you've mentioned that in terms of obviously the sales teams. And how do you get that content from those teams, and how do you engage them as subject matter experts in order to be able to drive that content? And
well, I mean, unfortunately, Hannah, for the most part, it's kind of a bit ad hoc. As Christian said, it's kind of trying to stop people in the corridors and ask them questions, and kind of, just overhearing conversations and then drilling down into it. I think most companies don't have a formal process for gathering that information and even sort of keeping that information long after people have left the company. And it's, you know, Christian talked earlier about silos. And you'd sort of say, yeah, you've got people sitting in offices, job is to create content, and they don't realize, well, you know, the guys who are upstairs on customer support, they don't realize that they're actually generating content that lives in their head and it never goes anywhere else. And that there, you know, there should be a way for us to kind of gather that information and use it, you know, in terms of generating content. And the same, as I say, the guys who go out, the engineers who are out dealing with customers, again, you know, they can feedback. So yeah, as I say, I don't think most companies at the minute have a formal way to gather that information and to utilize it. And I know that when I was working on reports in various companies, it was, you know, banging on people's doors, you know, trying to get their time, and, you know, and so yeah, it can be difficult.
Christian, any?
Yeah, well, I'm been in the same boat. There's stuff everywhere scattered around, email, ideas in my head, post-it notes, bits, all the rest of it. But I'm using Ooster at the minute for that purpose. It's been quite useful in enabling me to gather that. There's other systems around doing similar things for idea generation and crowdsourcing the content. I think that's a very under-serviced requirement at the moment, so probably we'll start to see more of those solutions come out, because I think there's plenty of marketing tools and automation at the back end to sort of push the content out and even create the content, but the gathering and organizing that is a major challenge for most organizations, even small, such as myself, you know, between, you know, the various parties that I'm engaging with. It's just difficult to keep track. So I'm utilizing that quite successfully at the moment, but it's I think an area that will only grow, that requirement, because the amount of research and sort of opportunity to gather insight is only going to increase, and as we've already been discussing, it becomes increasingly important to do that.
Perfect. And Celine, anything else that you wanted to add on that point?
No, I think Janet said an interesting bit about, you know, people buy from people, and I think on that same vein, it is around talking to people, listening to people, reading. You know, as Christian mentioned, all sorts of things can spark an idea. So it's probably just being open to that in whatever format. I know, Christian, obviously there's the professional platforms and tools and ways of doing that, and I think you're right. We're going to see a lot more of that, and people needing a lot more of that to you know, sift through the content, audit the content, come out with the most relevant and useful content from that. But for me, a lot of it is just sparked by an idea or a random comment someone's had, and you think, oh, that could be a really good avenue, or, you know, that's a really unique take on that particular solution that we offer that's quite complicated. Let's look into that a bit further. So yeah, I think it's really just being open and listening and talking, and as Christian said, almost you know, collating everything you've got and evaluating it and sifting through it and sort of working on it from that sort of perspective.
And like on that, I mean, it's just, there's nothing more frustrating than when, you know, when something hits the wires, when it's kind of a story or a trend, and somebody in the company says, oh, I could have told you that 6 weeks ago, you know, that's been buzzing around. You were like, yeah, if we'd known that, we could have been first out with this, you know. But, oh, yeah, you know. So that is frustrating, but yeah.
I think it's always good to be, and I'm only saying that because I really am, is to be very nosy, and, you know, ask lots of questions and kind of be really curious, and sort of, as Janet said there, you know, get yourself involved in lots of conversations, listen to what people are saying, because actually that could be a really good nugget of something that could really create some brilliant content. So yeah, I'm a naturally, I'm going to call it inquisitive, but it's probably more nosy, and that's often where a lot of these ideas come from. So I think that's a really good point, Janet, that actually listening to the business and other people in the business and people you perhaps don't always engage with is a really great way to get that.
Yeah, and I mean, especially now when everybody is remote working, there's no kind of, you know, chats at the coffee machine anymore, or, you know, as I say. So yeah, it's that's missing, and I think that's I was reading a report recently where they said, you know, will people come back to the office? And they said, well, you know, companies are worried that they will lose that kind of brainstorming, those kind of, you know, those, you know, water cooler moments where you say, oh, you know, so yeah, it's important to capture that.
Brilliant. I know that we're into the last 10 minutes of the webinar. There's been some really great ideas and information that you guys have provided. And we do have some questions from the audience. So I thought that for the last 10 minutes, we can just go through some of those. So you guys have obviously spoken a lot about content, what works and so forth. How do you go about generating the ideas for content at the moment? How do you go about it? What does that process look like? Celine, would you mind starting off with that one?
Yeah, so it depends what the person asking the question means. If you mean from an actual process production point of view, you know, the way we would do it at Tech Data is we do have very qualified content writers, content managers, who would then spend the time, again, it's around the time and the audience, but interviewing people in the business, understanding, you know, what they're trying to get across with that product or that solution. Sorry, trying to understand what it is that we want to get across and what the action would be. And then they would go in, and again, it's not just a bump, here it is, I've written it, it's brilliant. It's then listening to that feedback, shaping it, editing it, getting in the relevant experts to help you craft that and tweak it to make sure it is relevant for the audience. So that's probably the, you know, very process descriptive answer as to how we actually would do it at Tech Data. If you're talking about how do we, again, as we've talked about, how do we gather those ideas, how do we get those ideas, I just think it's about being open, and it's about talking to our customers, talking to competitors, listening to our competitors, seeing what's going on there, you know, looking at the industry, what's happening, what might be useful. One of the things I always try and think of, you know, when I think of a particular audience that we're trying to hit, is what's keeping them up at night. You know, what is it that's bothering them, that's playing on their mind, and then how can this, whatever it is, actually meet that need. Now, you know, clearly we're in marketing, we're not brain surgeons, so it's not life or death, but it's really thinking what might be annoying that person in the C-suite. You know, the HR director, what are they concerned about? What do they care about? What are their problems? And how can what we're doing here that we know would work well for them, how can we craft the content that really resonates with them and really makes them feel that we understand them and can help and support them? So that's probably the two, you know, the very basic process way and more the thought process behind how we address things.
And Janet, from your side, did you have any feedback?
Yeah, I mean, well, I always sort of come back to the customer, and I love sort of, you know, talk to your current customers, because I think the reason that your current customers buy your products is the same reason why other people will want to buy them. So I think it's always good to just, you know, check in with your customers, find out, well, you know, what kind of pain points did you have? You know, what was life before you bought our product? What is life like now? And those conversations, I think, are hugely important. I mean, in that you can then say, okay, well, if I was trying to sell this product to somebody else, you know, these are the things that I need to talk about. This is how this product will help them. So, I mean, I don't think you can ever go wrong by talking to your customers. And I think that's a mistake that some people make, is that they do all of the marketing behind closed doors, and then they suddenly sit at the last point, they say, oh, well, let's talk to the customer. And of course, by then everything has been done. So I think, yeah, start with customer and figure out, what drove them to buy the product, and see if you can replicate that. And that's, yeah, that would be my tip. And also, I say, go back to the calendar and say, okay, well, what kind of content do I need? I mean, if you already have, 40 white papers, well, maybe you're good on white papers and start looking at something else, So yeah, just that's a good tip too. Okay.
Christian, anything to add?
Yeah, I suppose dropping in the word crowdsourcing again for good measure, but I'm doing a lot of I suppose holding the technical staff at gunpoint almost, and saying, right, what things are you hearing from the customers? Our product's quite multifaceted, so they might like aspects of it, but not others. What things are you hearing on the ground? What, if anything, have we even asked? Or what are people moaning about? And then the customers themselves, for their perspective directly. I tend to find the approach, the information I get through the technical route is a lot more authentic than the information I might get if I'm asking it or someone else is. So that route, I'm definitely exploring that a lot more. And just and widening the net out into the industry. And when I'm gathering, I'm sure we all do gather a lot of industry information, and I kind of collate that into one place, and I'm kind of storing it up. I don't know if you have, I have about 100 browser tabs open at any one time with information and articles that I've read, and I'm kind of stashing them away, and then I'm revisiting them further down the line. But I find in cyber security, there's a buzzword a week. You know, one week we're all talking about MDR, and next week we're talking about SOC as a service, or XDR is the one at the moment. So I think one of the key things is there to try and cut through all of those acronyms that technical people love to sort of bandy around and get stuck in on, and try and translate that into meaningful idea or pain points of things that can be addressed. But yeah, I'm very much canvassing the team that we have here, and then, you know, when I was out and about meeting other vendors and, you know, competitors and people in the same field, you know, asking them what they're doing in the spirit of sort of openness, and comparing notes, because and I do keep a close eye on what the competitors are doing, but I'm not lying awake at night worrying about it too much. But because I think the key thing is we need to, back right to the start, we need to be coming up with something highly original in a very crowded marketplace. So using our own internal expertise, I guess, to try and address that point.
I think that's a really good point, Christian, about the internal bit as well. Is actually, you know, if you're creating something that's to sell a product to an HR director or a you know, an MSP or whoever that might be, ask people within your organization as well. You know, hey, VP of sales, what's bothering you? What's keeping you awake? Hey, you know, business manager, what is it that would make your job easier? You know, what are you worrying about when you're meeting with your peers and your cohorts? What are they saying is an issue? What is the sort of trends in your world? And then crafting content to meet that. And, you know, I worked somewhere where we did that. Actually, we were trying to create content for the C-suite, and we actually asked our own C-suite, what are your problems? What are your pain points? What are the things that you want, you know, you're worrying about this year, and how can we help? And then we used them to sort of create the content that was video content and testimonials. So, you know, in the industry, they would hear from somebody like themselves having the same sort of problems they would. So, you know, you could be interviewing an MSP talking about what their problems are, what their issues are, their pain points. You're using that content to say, so, you know, here's what we're offering you, and this is how it would help, etc. So I think, you know, keep remembering to use your internal networks as well, and ask the people internally what they're looking for, because you can create some really good content that will resonate, whilst also showing your brand as you know, being authentic and trustworthy, because, you know, actual people in those same roles are telling you that kind of information.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I would say, Kristen touched on it, is look what your competitor are doing and don't be afraid to copy their ideas. But the other thing that I suppose, like, I mean, I suppose it's unusual that we're well, the three of us are vendors, and Celine is a distributor, but you know, you can also sort of lean on your vendors. I mean, if you're not a vendor yourself, you can lean on your vendors because they will have content. But again, the caveat is don't just push out what they give you. Look at it and maybe sort of adapt it to your own needs. You know, so it's also something you can do.
Perfect. Well, we're at the top of the hour now, so I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all three of you for taking the time today and for sharing your thoughts and for answering the questions. So just to go through the last couple of slides, that if there's anyone on the line that is looking for a new tool to be able to deliver authentic, targeted content marketing, and to go through that thought leadership and to be able to engage those experts in your business, then please do, if you would like to explore how UXA can help you do that, then please feel free to either email me directly at hannah@uxa.com, or you can go via the link below. But thank you so much to everyone for listening, and thank you again to Janet, Christian and Celine for joining us today, and for sharing such great insights. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.